Hey guys, what's up? Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/eggs-show. That's EGGSSHOW. Audible has more than 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or just about any device you can imagine. As Eggs listeners, you can download a free audiobook today by visiting audibletrial.com/eggs-show.
Bang ding ding, trademark. He come out 6'7" tall. Bang ding ding, one is star. Bang dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding. This is a perfect day.
Woke up to the sound of the garbage truck again. Upstairs neighbor's toilet's leaking on my head. Cars broke down, I missed the bus, there runs a 10. I had a feeling this was a day to stay in bed. I finally left my pad right on the jumbo's cloud roof. A police officer pulled out his gun and said, I said, sir, you got the wrong guy. I guess it's just a perfect day. It's just a perfect day. Na, 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 na,
Hey everybody, welcome to another exciting edition of Eggs. We are live on YouTube right now. You can stream the show YouTube live. You can also catch it over at eggscast.com. Today we have special guest Chris Cochella. He's a business coach, entrepreneur, man of many hats here in the Salt Lake City area. He is owner and founder of a company called Brackets, which are STEM toys for kids. He's also done a million other things that will allow him to elaborate on. So without any further ado, ladies and gents, meet our guest, Chris Cochella.
Hey Chris,
Thanks, guys.
thanks for coming in. Appreciate it. I know it's early in the morning, and how was traffic on the way in? Not too bad?
Oh, not at all.
Okay,
no, it's
good.
great. It's a pleasure to be here.
Cool.
So, there you go.
Yep.
And
So let's kind of kick this thing off and let's talk a little bit of backstory. So the way Chris and our team, Mike and I, came together was we basically were all working at I guess you were touring Access Studios. We were both Mike and I were here working, and Chris was brought through by one of the guys that runs Access Salt Lake here, where the studio is located. And he brought Chris by. We got talking for a minute and sort of hit it off. And he approached us shortly after having met us about coming on the show. After doing a little bit of research and looking at the materials he sent over, I was really excited to have him on the show. And,
Likewise.
and so we made it happen.
yeah.
Cool.
So let's go back in time a little bit. Let's talk about you and where you come from, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I heard a rumor from like your early years that you started a business in high school reselling bubble gum.
Yeah, that was actually in junior high school. I've always had this entrepreneurial spirit, and in junior high school, Bubble Yum and Bubblicious were the rage at the time, especially the pink version. I'm not even sure if it exists anymore. But I realized that people were kind of jonesing for bubblegum at recess and break, and I could sell the Bubblicious pieces at 5x over what I could buy them for retail.
Nice.
And so I played that game for a while. It worked out really well for pocket change as a junior high school
middle
kid.
school kid. Yeah,
That's right.
perfect. What was your next venture after that?
Gosh, after that, it was probably in high school, actually. Two buddies and I started a company where we manufactured ski boot holders. This is back in the day when they didn't have those power straps that you could Velcro to each other, and the typical way of carrying boots was either in your hands or a little T-handle with a loop on it. But that meant you still used up a hand. So we were always frustrated with consuming a hand, walking
Walking
the
from the
parking lot or... we were adventurous sometimes. We'd walk to different places in the resorts and, be mischievous. And so you needed that extra hand, right, to carry your skis, your poles, or whatever, a backpack or something. And so we put together a webbing-based solution with 2 loops on either end, and you could sling it over your shoulders, and thereby getting rid of, using that one hand for these clunky things. And we sewed them, we screen printed the top, we had the idea that we could brand them. We had our own brand, but we could, custom make them for ski shops or, other brands that wanted to give away or a product like that.
Did you do much with it, or was it just kind of friends and family at that point?
Yeah, we didn't do a lot with it. As usual, who you do things with and how that goes is always interesting. I had a screen printer built and bought it and started doing it, and I bought a sewing machine and started making them. And my other 2 partners were supposed to go sell them, but they never really hit the streets. And selling's hard, right? You got to walk in, you say, hey, my name is, this is what I'm selling you. And so I hit the streets and sold them too for a while. And, at some point it just kind of fell apart as, high school things can do sometimes, right?
High school and then moving on in life since then, yeah.
So, but would it be fair to say that, basically as a kid or from youth, you've been entrepreneurial in spirit? And, does that come from somewhere, like mom and dad? Were they sort of in business for themselves? Or where do you attribute this sort of, I guess, curiosity to?
Boy, I don't know. I don't think I can tell a birth story. It's ever since I was a young kid, whether it was mowing lawns, newspaper routes, doubling up my route, looking for leverage on things has always been part of my thought process.
My mom was huge into landscaping. Like that was her thing. And they'd buy a house and then fix it up. And her thing was always the yard. And I was always the one that was put to work doing the landscaping. And when I was like 5 or 6, she used to pay me like a nickel to go and dig holes for trees. And I'd get a whole quarter every day. It was perfect.
Right on.
Yeah.
No, it's funny. I actually did had a story sort of similar to yours, where I was selling Swedish fish and lollies were the 2 candies of the day. There was a KOA near my high school, and they had a bunch of penny candies and stuff. So I'd go buy the penny candies and come back and flip them for quarters and stuff too. So,
nice.
I mean, it wasn't high dollar in high school or anything, but it was the beginnings of something.
Yeah, and the model, the pattern of doing that is similar today. It's vastly more complex when you try to make more.
Yeah.
Because easy things have been squeezed out. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
So let's get past the penny candies and the.
Hey there, how dare you cheapen our careers?
So you've got 2 college degrees.
Yep.
One in economics and one in geology. That's kind of, completely worlds apart. I assume you just kind of took what you wanted, or did you kind of have an idea of what, like, the economics is probably your main focus and the geology was fun, or?
Well, a little bit, yeah. So I'll tell that story real quickly. When I was in high school, I really was interested in investment banking.
Okay.
I started taking investing courses at the nearby college, St. Mary's College, and learning, what a stock was and what the measures of value were, and very intrigued by that and started investing at that time. So I had this, direction toward business, and economics seemed like a good fit. And so I graduated in that at UC Berkeley. But about my junior year or so, in the summers, I started working as a rafting guide.
Oh, nice.
And that kind of spawned out of my addiction to skiing and, back to
Outdoor
activities. And so I realized, wow, next couple of years in the summer, I can work as a rafting guide. I can float rivers. I get paid to cook and,
Camp, have fun.
adventure.
Yeah.
I get off the river and time's my own. And so I pursued that, and that really opened my eyes to environmental issues, the environment in general. I've always liked to be outside, but that really cracked it open, in terms of camping for 5-6 days at a time, roaming around in my car. And it sparked an interest in environmental science, and then I switched gears and began pursuing a path toward geology. So that I could, do field work, I could study rivers and water flow,
And have an excuse to do it.
and that was fantastic. So I kind of went back to school on my own dime. I graduated. I didn't say, "Hey, Dad, hey, Mom, I want 4 more years, right, on the bank."
Right.
I said, "No, if this is real, I'm going to graduate. I'm going to do this myself and own it." And so I took chemistry and physics at the junior college. I bargained for kind of my way into some graduate classes at UC Berkeley in the geology department as a non-matriculated student. And, built that up so that I could then apply to graduate school, which I did. I went to CU Boulder, actually in the geography department studying fluvial geomorphology, which is basically streams and rivers and channels in natural settings as opposed to engineered settings.
And as opposed to the Columbia River right now.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a rather large one.
Yeah.
I was on, more the rafting scale or creeks and streams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that's kind of my neck of the woods is Columbia River
Okay.
area, and there's so many dams along that stretch that it's a glorified lake.
Yeah, right. And I did some research on the Grand Canyon, which was really fun. So I
that
got
would
to
be
do field
fun.
work for 2-3 weeks during their first planned flood. So they, environmentalists have been arguing for a while that the flows out of Glen Canyon Dam need to go up in order to maintain the
ecology
habitat
around it,
and
yeah.
the beaches, really. Because if the water doesn't get high enough and flow fast enough, you don't take the sand from the bottom of the river and put it up on the beaches, which are not only good for camping and the recreation down the Grand Canyon, which is world-renowned, it's also necessary for fish habitat to clean the spawning areas and riparian birds and
So
and
essentially,
other
they
animals.
just let a lot more water through and flooded it
Yep.
planned just for that sole
Correct.
purpose.
Correct. And we
Interesting.
measured what that impact would be because the water planners only want to release it when they want to release it for the purpose of
Reserving the water.
electric
yeah.
generation,
Yeah.
right? So it's a balance of issues, and those are always hard with, at a grand scale like that when it comes to electricity and water. And they're now doing planned releases at least once a year now.
Nice.
And the director is a guy I met in that process. He's at Utah State, actually.
Interesting. Yeah,
really
I
cool.
love learning stuff like that. I mean, that's the benefit of doing a podcast like this is just the random stuff you
The
kind of
random
pick
stuff,
up.
yeah,
I love
it's
it.
cool.
Yeah. Well, so to sort of keep things on track, okay, so we've
Sorry.
got no, I love it. I'm just trying to sort of tie all this back into business.
Yeah.
So because people may not see an obvious fit between geology and business, but in your case, obviously started with economics. So I mean there's an obvious tie there, and I would probably make the argument that science is a little analytical. Maybe it's in the same world too.
For sure.
So really not that far removed if you try and draw a straight line between the two. But from there, like having established your formal education, how did you sort of roll into the life of an entrepreneur, the life of a business person?
Yeah, that really, and a lot of the skills are the same. The analytical skills, the posing of a hypothesis and testing it are very much the same. So if you take the labels off, a lot of the thought processes are still there. But what happened in, I think it was about my third year in graduate school, two things happened. I met a woman who was then going to become my wife at some point, and the internet came out. So, now we know it as an everyday sort of thing, but back then it was like, what the heck,
Had the
right? We were
AOL
talking about
dial-tone.
Mosaic and what's internet?
Right.
Tom Brokaw's like, what's internet?
I heard that you could connect two computers together and talk.
Right.
Yeah, no, I'm still very Pavlovian when I hear dial-up tones from the old dial-up internet for people who are too young to understand that.
I know.
But whenever I hear that
Crazy
sound, it's
time.
like my ears
I
perk
just
up.
loved it how you could go to like a gas station and get the AOL online CD just sitting there at the register, like take it
I
home,
know.
install it, like
And they're sitting in the mailbox
Yeah.
and everything. And so that came out, and that was very exciting. And I was a computer programmer. I did it for science. I had a number of computer programming classes in the past. And so I started dibbling and dabbling in that. It started to enter in the science realm as well in terms of sharing data or exposing what we found in our experiments because they were very visual, topographical. So I started programming in the Java language, make little applets.
Nice.
Which I don't even think applets are used in the same way any longer. and then I took a part-time job at a marketing agency, and of course they're all abuzz over the internet, right? Because this is a whole new medium for them to, do their business. And in meeting my wife and kind of relocating, I decided to exit the PhD program. I'd already got my master's. And I thought, let's take a break, go live near, this wonderful woman, and And in so doing, I gravitated more toward the internet programming and started, building things with CGI programming. Now it's Python and PHP,
Yeah.
and everything's under a different name. It's horribly difficult back then.
I can't even imagine.
No one wanted to give you back-end access. So, to access a database was like, you had to, talk to Congress at a place like X Mission and to let you in, right?
Yeah.
There's no safe sandbox. And so that progressed. And then at some point I realized I probably wasn't going to go back and finish my PhD. My wife got into residency here at the University of Utah.
Is she a nurse?
Yeah.
Nice.
Physician, actually.
Okay.
And then got a job working for KUED, the public radio station, and as an internet programmer. So I built a big online library of media.
Nice.
And that was a soft-funded job, and at some point that ended. And when that ended, I branched out and started consulting, doing back-end systems for clients for a number of years. So there's I hope
the
your
transition,
segue,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yep. Nope. That's great.
So it economics, geology, programming, is there something you don't do? I mean, like, seriously.
Blessing or a curse. I'm non-traditional, right?
I love
It makes
it.
a great story, but
Yeah.
it isn't all roses sometimes.
So back then, the early days of programming, I mean, they didn't have online training courses or places you can go.
No.
You pretty much had to either read a book or go to college. What was your route?
Well, O'Reilly was the main source, the Tim O'Reilly books, and I'm not quite sure how they're doing things now, but they were extremely useful.
Interesting.
Programming books, regular expression books, Perl, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Perl, then PHP, and now we're on to Python and all the JavaScript languages.
So you're pretty much self-taught in the programming world, or did you take classes through college?
No, I'm pretty much self-taught. I had a programming background in C, and then unfortunately Fortran, which is very rigid, right? Everything had to be on a certain column. Oh, wow, talk about rigidity. But that was kind of the programming language of science, and my supervisor at the U.S. Geological Survey when I was in graduate school. So we kind of had to overlap there. A lot of people were doing C, but for the purposes of my projects, I was in Fortran.
I think that's cool. I would have never thought that like a geology degree would require any type of programming or computer science knowledge just to be able to do what you needed to do.
Lots of data.
Yeah, I can imagine.
You're collecting lots of data. You're going back into data banks and grabbing data, like calendar data for flows and rivers, reformatting them. So you need some sort of scripting environment to like take a Julian calendar and make it linear so that you can just look at, days from the past and into the future.
That's crazy.
Temperature.
Yeah,
all kinds of things.
I love it.
right?
I
mean,
think it's neat. I would have never put
it's
those two
funny
together.
all the parallels. So we talked a little bit before the show and how one of the things that we do here at Eggs is we talk about this idea of process and this idea of moving things from one spot to another, or from coop to table is what I always say. And so one of the things I wanted to get into with you, because you have a lot of expertise in this field, is sort of taking an upstart product or a new brand or a startup business or something and sort of taking it to completion. Or at least to some version of, not in business to in business. And so I wondered if we couldn't, either do something hypothetical or work with, maybe something you've done in the past and sort of just work through the process of ideation into formation of the company, the steps it took to get to wherever, whether it was funding or financing, maybe pitfalls come across along the way and that sort of thing. It's a little bit of storytelling, but I couldn't think of a better brain to pick than yours.
That would be great. And I love the hypothetical. It keeps me on my toes. But Brackets, the last company I started,
Would be the
is probably
perfect example.
a great example.
Yeah.
And I applied a lot of the current processes that are coming out now, like lean methods. They've been out for about 10 years. I was not aware of them when I started. I took a very scientific approach, which lean methods advocate. So we can jump into that story.
There. Yeah,
Sure.
that'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about where'd the idea come from in the first place. I mean, I guess at least in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm a budding entrepreneur and I'm trying to figure all this stuff out. But you've got a little bit of distance on me. In my mind, it begins with an idea or this thought. You
For sure.
Identified a problem you're trying to solve or whatever it is.
That's right. So it began when I was teaching in my kids' elementary school. I was friends with a teacher there. She was going to take kind of half a year off and said, hey, why don't we start a hands-on science program? Science isn't super rich at the school, and this is in Salt Lake. I thought, well, okay, let's give this a shot. So we started this hands-on science program. And coming from a science background, that fit. My kids were in the school. And in the middle of that, I became aware of the trend in STEM education. So it's really popular now. I'm sure you guys are aware of it. Science, technology, engineering, and math.
Both my boys go to a technology school.
There,
So that's what
there
we
you
do.
go. We have the STEM initiative from the Governor's Office of Economic Development now. And it's there's two sides of it. We want both the education for our kids and the opportunities, but then businesses are finding a scarcity of employees.
Right.
So I became really aware of that, and I thought, well, okay, this is right up my alley. What's STEM? How's it working? What's missing? And I thought, the E is engineering. We weren't doing a lot of engineering specifically in the classroom, and I thought, well, what's out there? So I started looking, and I thought, hey, I'm going to go get an engineering toy for my 6-year-old. He was in first grade, and I went to the store, a couple stores, looking for building an engineering toy. Because all we had up to then were stacking blocks and bricks, which
Like
were pretty
the
much
Lincoln Logs and
like
Lincoln
Lego
Logs,
or
Tinker
something.
Toys.
Yeah.
Tinker Toys are just sort of super abstract. Stacking blocks are great, but he's 6 now.
Yeah.
Right? He can build them to the ceiling, and then he wants to throw a basketball at it, which is a great experiment in its own right, but at some point we're not really exercising our brain
Creativity,
muscle,
yeah.
our creativity, our problem-solving skills. And so I went and bought a product, and it was for kids 10 and up. So I got kind of a 4-year gap, but I'm thinking, we can do it. I brought it home. We spilled it out. He was super excited. And it's like in 5 minutes, I was wiping up tears and putting the toy away.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, parenting is just
Yeah.
a series of lessons learned for adults, right? and he really wanted to build these kind of crazy structures. But the parts are really small, and the snapping mechanisms were tough for his smaller fingers. And he's not a small kid, so I felt like I now got to solve this problem, right? If not for myself, I at least got to explore it. And here's the risky part: you get this idea and you start exploring it, and it's really fun, and then you get down that path.
Yeah.
and
Like, what did I get
you're
myself
like,
into?
what did I get myself into? Exactly. Well, I seem to be a serial guy with that problem. And so I started experimenting in my garage, buying blocks, buying other products, tearing them apart, seeing how I could create an interconnecting toy that was easy for young kids. And my target at that point, or my lowest common denominator, was 3 years old. That's where the choking hazard comes into play. That's where kids are, in daycares often, very quickly heading toward kindergarten and the school system. And so I'm also thinking market, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
I could sell to education, parents that see this need at home. I got 2 markets. I'm pretty sure this is big enough. Some quick calculations will tell me, there's a fairly sizable target. And so I put together lots of different things: glue, snips, everything. And then at one point, I befriended a guy who does plastic injection molding here in the Valley. He's got one machine to make a tool, the mold, and he's got another machine 20 feet away to plop it in and punch out parts.
Oh, wow.
So I made the gulp of making a tool, is $4,000 or $5,000.
Oh, is that all?
Yeah, so this was pretty reasonable.
Yeah, that seems pretty doable.
And I could use wood blocks. So, those I could either have fabricated, you could actually buy them on the market. So I use them to kind of anchor my scaling. And, how big should these connectors be? Sure. They were popular in in schools and in households already. So I'm an incremental invention or innovation on top of that. So I had a 2-cavity tool, and I started punching them out and distributing them to as many people as I could in kind of a methodic process. So I took the approach of, okay, do I know a parent that would put these in their home and give me feedback? Well, that's pretty easy. I got lots of friends with kids, and we could go that route. I did the same thing with teachers, people very close at hand. Of course, as we all know, they like to tell you what you want to hear. Sometimes they don't like to tell you
Sure.
that it has problems. They go, "Oh, great idea! You're going to make $1 million, right?"
You're like,
Like, okay,
honest feedback, please.
right. No matter how many times you say that, it doesn't quite come around, or you can't quite trust it, even though you do trust the people.
Sure.
And so I continued to expand that ring further and further out to the point where I got to teachers I didn't know in states far away, and they were giving me honest feedback. And so both confirmation that I'm kind of on to something, and I only had 2 parts, right? I had a block and I had a 4-way connector. And if you go to brackets.com out there, for those that are listening, it's brackitz.com. You can see kind of how they work. We've ultimately expanded to plastic blocks and a whole bunch of other pieces, but it was a fairly simple way to validate and test the market.
With the wood blocks and go that route.
Yeah.
Well, and it was interesting. I was listening to an interview you did just recently on Park City TV.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things I thought was really interesting, was this idea of, I guess, consumer testing ahead of time. I'm notorious for, I've got a great idea, run to market with it, and bypass that whole does anyone want it part. I mean, obviously, you just sort of described the process a little bit, but I mean, what role does that play in developing a new product?
I think it plays a huge role, and I even catch myself doing what you just described, becoming really romanticized about the solution and wanting to bring that into form, into picture, building a prototype, heading to market, like you said. Mm-hmm. And in my coaching business, I see this a lot, that there isn't enough time spent obsessing about the problem, and we tend to quickly leave the problem and go to the solution and think we have the match. And behind the veil, layers of the onion, so to speak, are nuggets, right? They're things that you don't know. So you have to keep peeling them away until you have a clear picture of what problem you're really solving and for whom exactly. And is that big enough? Do you understand it well enough? Do you trust the feedback that you've gotten? Is it not statistically significant, because that could take hundreds and hundreds of interviews that you're really not going to get to until you enter the market? But have you gotten enough in the tank to say, yeah, I really have this for this population of people? Mm-hmm. Is it moms 32 to 37 that have a degree in college, that live on the coast? I mean, that just potentially changed your go-to-market world and whether or not this is a good idea.
That's crazy. Just taking into consideration all the factors of, if it's actually going to work, Did you do any, I don't know what kind of market research you would do for brackets, other than just give it to your friends and get feedback. When you actually came out with the product and sent it to schools, how was the feedback from them? For just looking at the videos online, it looked like the kids were having a lot of fun. One of them, they had a Ferris wheel built that was fully rotational and cool,
about 3 feet,
3 feet tall, and it looks like just the creativity involved with your product is the sky's the limit. You can make anything you want, really.
We got lots of great feedback, and
Yeah.
feedback you couldn't ask in a survey,
Yeah.
which is another interesting point here. Surveys are great because it gives you tabular data, right? And you can add it all up, right? You can add up scores like net promoter scores and things like that. But what you don't get there is the open-ended conversation, much like this conversation, right? We're going to head in different directions and tell stories and talk about things that you would never get if you just asked me a survey.
Yeah.
And so I spent time in classrooms and a lot of time on the phone talking to those teachers after they had a cold, clean experience, right? I didn't sway them. I didn't train them. I just said, would you put it on the floor? And they would put it on the floor and walk away. And the stories that came back were very telling. The fun was a really big one. And that's super important because if people aren't having fun, they often don't stick with it, especially kids. And why would a teacher adopt something that is hard work for them?
Yeah.
Right. So adoption is easier. And other stories that came back that totally surprised me were that kids were being creative, right? I sort of had a linear view of this, engineering-like, science-like, right? And they came back with all kinds of stories of creativity. For example, a kid built a space station and another kid built a a firehouse, and they put them together. And now they have the firehouse
In
going
space.
going to the moon or on the space shuttle.
Yeah, I
right?
love it.
I'm now watching the series Mars from National Geographic, and lo and behold, you need fire suppression on Mars, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it makes complete
it
sense,
makes total sense,
Right?
and so stories like that opened my mind up to the idea that the product was way more creative than I gave it credit for. And the flexibility of our connection, which is the source of our intellectual property, allows kids to place the block into the connection and rotate the block. Most toys are engineered to snap in at a fixed length and a fixed angle. So that restricts
What
sort
you
of
can do with it.
free-form creativity.
Yeah.
There's still creativity, but you can connect anywhere along the edge of our block. You can take a 4-inch block and turn it into a 1-inch block.
Okay.
You could take a 90-degree angle and make it 82.5.
Yeah.
And as I started to engage specialists in STEM education, they really pointed that out as well, because they were non-typical angles. And so education, we have a 90 degree, we have something
45,
less than 90, we
yeah.
have 45, we're going to stop. But these kids in playing with it then become immersed in the problem solving and creativity of all kinds of irregular angles, which is much more consistent
opens the
with
brain to
the
different
world,
things.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what did you find in terms of, so you basically, you took your concept, you shopped it around, you got all this, you collected all this data and all this research on different things. What was your iterative process like? Like, did you go back to the drawing board and redesign your blocks over and over and over again? Did you find that, your initial concept was strong and it just needed extension, or what did you find in that regard?
Well, I was kind of lucky. Once I built the tool, and like I described, that product didn't need a whole lot of revisions. In terms of making new pieces, we did go through a process, and I had a fairly clear roadmap. But the product itself and its essence and its platform worked really well, and I continued to collect that validation. In my process of collecting that, I actually followed kind of a dashboarding process that was illustrated in a book called Getting to Plan B. And these two venture capitalists wrote this book, and they said, you can spend all your time writing these long business plans and building this hockey stick curve, but it never works out that way initially, right? You go out, you try it, and it turns into something else. And all these big names that we know now, Facebook and Airbnb and PayPal, they all started as other things that when you read the story, you're like, oh, that was dumb. Right, but we know that in hindsight.
Well, even like Squarespace, I mean, they started off with, just a way to process your credit card. Now they've got time tracking. It's almost an online version of QuickBooks almost, but a different platform that does it all, which is cool.
And that made a lot of sense to me
Yeah.
because writing this long business plan when, I'm not selling it to anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, how can I write a business plan? I can guess at my margins and things, but what I really need to know is, do my customers like it? Are
Yeah.
they excited about it? Because if they're excited about it, I'm pretty sure we can get manufacturing down, right? We're making them in a shop in Salt Lake 2 at a time.
Sure.
We could scale this. Someone can scale this.
Right.
And so I felt pretty confident about that. And I did, set out this dashboard where I would ask a new question successively. I'd answer that question. Sometimes it was affirmative, sometimes it was negative, and then I'd ask a new question. So it was really one small lesson at a time, and I could iterate on that question or the new questions days and weeks. It didn't take a long time, but the power was in how simple the question was, and that it was reasonable for me to go out on the street and ask a teacher a handful of questions to get an answer and then move forward. And I did that not only with teachers, I did it with consumers, then I did it with specialists, then I did it with administrators, then I did it with other toy companies, to continually build that kind of, ballast in the ship.
That's neat. So you've got kind of the core concept, and you've got the starting pieces to kind of take it to market. How do you scale up? Like going, see, that's the tricky part, right?
Oh yeah. Well, not only scale up, but also prove it even more in the marketplace, so that you can justify
So what was
scaling up.
what was your journey like with brackets? Like, was your intention to wholly own this product yourself, and you didn't seek outside funds or anything like that to go to the next step?
Right. So my
what was the game plan on that?
My initial exit plan was that I would validate all of this, and I'd bring it to a point where I could license it, or sell it off to another toy company.
Yeah.
They have the scalability, they have the distribution, they have the overseas manufacturing, so on and so forth. Right, big things, relationships with buyers and so on.
Yeah.
And so I got to a point where I had all this information, I had the product, I had a good story, I had a marketing pitch, and I went to I did a little PR campaign here in Salt Lake. I got on KSL Evening News, and then I took that video and that storyline, and I went to Toy Fair. Toy Fair is the biggest North American toy show. It's out in February, so it's coming up. And I just walked the floor, slept on a friend's couch.
Yeah.
Bought the cheapest ticket I could. I'm going to go low on this, and spoke to a variety of toy companies that entertain ideas in the open innovation kind of era. It's pretty common in the toy industry. It's hard to see all these things from within your walls, and some actually specialize in this. And so I had a number of conversations, and got to a point where I had a couple kind of letters of intent and kind of term discussions.
And is that the route you went, or?
Well, it is not the route I went. I spent a lot of time, in this protracted, are we ready? Where's the next step? And so on. And the most promising one was that we were getting close to signing something. We had minimums figured out. We had a term amount. They had some, put their marketing team in touch with me, and we were building a beginning of a marketing plan. And then at some point, they were bought by a private equity company. So now we have a fully shifting landscape. Mm-hmm. They were still interested in the product, but the president, it was a family-started business from way back, and so they sold out to private equity, and I think the president or the VP was now going to be the CEO, and he was not part of the family, so the family was kind of moving away, and he saw, additional risk with their existing lines and some other things, and being under the scrutiny of private equity that put cold water on it. So that ended, and it was headed toward, I'm not going to go further out on a limb with money or time. And so I hadn't quite given up, but that was kind of a low point.
It couldn't be a priority every day.
Yeah. Like, what do I do now? Right.
Yeah.
And I would talk to people, and ultimately told the story to an investor, just casually, right? No intent, no kind of appointment. And she called me back, I think, a couple months later, and thought, I really like this story. I like what you have here. I want to scale it.
Nice.
And so we struck a deal, and I went on. I continued with the team for about 4.5 years. And since then, we developed the plastic planks so that we could have more interconnectivity and kind of an easier playability. And we brought in tires and
You've
gears.
got a rotating pivot point that I saw.
Rotating pivot point. Yeah,
that's
so
pretty neat.
I designed a lot of those open doors, so that we could pursue new interconnections without seeing completely the future.
Yeah.
But hopefully I guessed well enough.
So can we talk a little bit more about the subject of licensing? Like, do you think that that's a pretty viable route for a lot of people who are, product developers, or people who have inventions or ideas but know that they're not going to, displace Hasbro or something? Like, is it better to join them than to beat them, do you think?
Well, it's very hard to bring something to market and handle all that risk when you can look across the table and talk to someone that basically has most of that risk removed.
Yeah.
Just the machinery of distribution and the scale of buying a container full of your product overseas and having it land on your doorstep, so to speak. So I think licensing is a viable option. Each industry is different. It's very common in toy. I mean, I could rattle off 10 stories off the top of my head, and there's even toy companies that specialize in that. And now Brackets and its parent company are looking for outside things as well. So I do think it's viable. I'm involved in another potentially licensing situation right now with an idea that I have, and we'll see. It's a different industry. It's the outdoor industry. There's lots of books and people talking about the promise of licensing, but like everything, there's potholes underneath that pretty story. Sure. And I'm not saying their story's wrong, but it kind of remains to be seen, right? And it's serious business too. Yeah. And you're exposing your story before it exists, and so how do you manage that relationship?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So I guess if licensing is one option, I guess another would be just an outside investor, and then maybe the third one is just go it on your own.
Right.
I mean, does that cover kind of all the bases of where one might go once you arrived at the spot, you've done your research, you have your product, and then you're asking yourself where to from there?
I think that does, in my mind, describe the three general paths. Yeah.
Okay. And from there, I mean, like you just said, it's difficult to move forward sometimes on your own, or you're obviously not going to beat these giants, these behemoths in their industries, or you're not going to be able to out distribute, some of these big companies or whatever. So, but what are can you speak to any pitfalls or things to look out for if you're looking for, like, let's say outside investors? Like, as you're starting to develop a relationship with, you want to find somebody to help finance your idea or back your idea. I think that's, you see these TV shows like the Shark Tanks and the stuff like that, right. And everybody gets these fantasies that, I can just go to an investor, they're going to give me some money and stuff's going to work out. But I feel like there's probably a little more to the equation than that. Can you, just using your experience, can you sort of elaborate on that idea of seeking out money and what that process is like?
Yeah, I've sought out money or a bigger relationship several times now, and each story is different. I guess the commonalities are that it's really important to know what you want to do. Are you going to go it alone and need a little seed capital, and you really want to build the team and run the team, or do you want to move it into another team, let's say licensing or some other partnership like environment? I think that's really important. In all of those cases, though, it's critical that you as the leader, the visionary, have a clear understanding of what the customer wants and how well you solve that problem. And I know we're returning to a prior topic, but what that does is it reduces the amount of uncertainty in any of those paths. So just take yourself, as the idea of taking it forward yourself, how do you know? Right? How do you feel good about dropping the next $10,000 or quitting your job and going forward? And it's knowing everything about your customer and your solution and that situation that takes a lot of the risk off the table for yourself. And as soon as you think you're done, I would do more.
I'm notorious for just jumping in and hoping that I land on something soft. That's the problem.
Well, inevitably, you can't get it completely away from that. I guess you're trying to take what might be a 7-foot hurdle, and I have a blog article on that, and reduce it to maybe 1 or 2 feet.
Yeah.
You can still trip and fall on your face, right? There's no getting rid of it completely, but if you can reduce the size of that hurdle, you're better off. As independent people and entrepreneurs and wanting to do it yourself, it's a little easier in your head to tell yourself the story, I got this, right? Because who's scrutinizing you?
Yeah.
Not many people.
At least he has a wife to rein him in. I don't even have that.
Right. Yeah, no, I sound a lot like you. I've always got, the next great thing. I've always got this new cool idea.
Yeah.
And actually, one of my biggest problems is deciding how to go forward or what to go forward on. Because, I have a laundry list of concepts. And, maybe some are better than others, maybe stronger, some are stronger than others. I haven't gone so far as market research. As I mentioned earlier, I feel pretty confident in my choices. So I've got, all these different things outlined and stuff. But then, I feel this constant drain on myself because I'm never accomplishing anything. I'm never working on any of these ideas, but they all seem like winners to me, right? Because nobody's shooting them down. Nobody's scrutinizing them other than my wife, who's just generally scrutinizing.
Yeah. So if you can build in processes to self-scrutinize, and the lean startup methods are really great this way.
Can you break that down a little bit?
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but this guy created the lean business canvas. And there's 9 boxes and it's 1 page. And if you can't fill those out with kind of a really, clear and concise, chunk of language, it's not really clear what you're doing.
Yeah.
So you can do that in 20 minutes. And I do that all the time. I'll have an idea, or I'll talk to someone that's come to me and said, hey, would you help me figure this out? And I get off the initial discovery phone call and I try to fill it out. And I look at how many holes there are, how confident I am just in hearing the story that these boxes are grounded. And I think doing that, or having someone else do it for you, or having your own little advisory council, let's say once a month, Ryan, go to coffee with everybody and have everyone poke at it.
So, I mean, do you ever worry about, throwing your idea out there and having someone just kind of rip it off?
Of course.
Yeah. I hate having those discovery meetings and just showing everything I've got and then just hoping it's...
Well, there's a process for that too. If they're friends and you all have the trust and the confidence, and you're going to see if I can graduate it past the coffee table with my friends, then what's the next outer ring?
Yeah.
Maybe it's people in the industry, maybe it's some product designers, maybe it's some app developers. And you say, hey, I have this idea. I've met you, or I know of you. Would you be willing to hear my idea and tell me where, what I might not be seeing?
Yeah.
People love that.
Yeah.
Right? Entrepreneurs love doing that.
I've showed
I do it all day long.
A product I'm working on to some friends just down the hall here, and the feedback I got from them was stuff I hadn't even thought about. Like,
right.
That's
the point.
And I was going down a more of a subscription-based model, but they pointed out some other revenue streams that I hadn't even thought were even on the table, which was pretty neat to hear, actually. So
right. So the more you can do that, the more frequently you can do it, and then begin expanding out, right? And Access is a great place, right? You
Yeah.
have an audience here all day long of creative thinkers, people that are entrepreneurs doing their own thing. They're probably not going to take your idea. Most people will sign an NDA if it gets to that point, and collect that information. And this information is not just valuable for you if you're going to go do it yourself. It's valuable for any discussion you were to have with a potential licensee or an investor.
yeah.
Because you're de-risking, or you're taking uncertainty off the table for them as well, which hopefully you can use to position into a better conversation, or a better valuation, or a more serious, pitch and dialogue.
Yeah. See, it's such a foreign concept to me. This is like so far left field for my I'm a DJ. I play music in nightclubs, and now I'm in this business world, and I've got ideas, and I've been working on some stuff, but just the actual, hey, let's talk about this. Let's put a plan together. Let's kind of move forward with it. It's like, it's so foreign to me, but I love it. It's so I'm excited for the next step, for what's going to come, and it's a really neat thing. And interviewing people like you on this podcast is just enlightening. I learn so much every time. So thank you for coming in and sharing your knowledge.
Oh, it's super fun. I enjoy it.
Well, so I guess if we're trying to, if I'm trying to distill part of our conversation about where to from here, you've developed your product, trying to choose a funnel to go through, whichever funnel it is, whether it's self-funded, getting money from somebody else, or whatever other alternative you come up with. The name of the game, it seems like, and it's funny because it seems super obvious, and maybe it's because of this your early interest in being in the financial world. But risk mitigation is really what it's all about. Like, sort of, if you were to distill all those ideas down, it's the idea of just eliminating and reducing risk in terms of getting someone to pitch in, even putting your own money in. And it's funny because I've actually never heard it said that way. And it feels like banker terms, because I feel like every banker is always looking to mitigate risk. But I'd never thought of it that way. And so for me, that gives me a nice, clear picture. I like the idea of outlining the stuff, and even if I am just going to fund it myself, to actually put that thought into it, because honestly, I've never crossed that bridge. It's like, oh, hey, we'll figure it out. We'll just throw money at it and it'll work. I know.
Right.
So.
Well, at some point, it's a balance between the two. But I think you're absolutely right. You're mitigating risk. I often don't start out that way because it's sort of banker speak, and you lose people. And then, so what do you do then? What do you do after you believe that you need to reduce risk? What's the action item from that? And you mentioned business plans and sort of documents and things. And I try to mentally, if not physically, put all those things to the side. And that's not really what's important. What's really important is what is the one thing I need to learn today? And so that could be as small as, let's look back to brackets. Does a teacher like the product?
Yeah.
That's not a complicated question. Executing on that requires discipline, right? It makes sense to everybody. So I got to get the product into a teacher's hand and walk away and let them tell a story. I need to do things like that again and again and again. In your example of bringing your subscription app idea or whatever it was to a group of people opened up all these doors. And sometimes that's deflating. You're like, oh, well,
I didn't want to go to that.
now I got to go figure all those out. But that's where you need to get excited.
Oh, it sparked a fire.
Okay,
in me.
that's awesome. Usually it deflates me, and then I get excited. I go through a little cycle.
Well, yeah, that's
'Cause
what's
like, now I got
tricky.
more work to do.
Yeah, you start to feel like you've reached the top, and then you find out, oh wait, there's actually another peak on the other side of that mountain.
Oh, dude, I hiked
Lots of them.
I hiked when I was like 15, 16. I hiked Mount Adams, which is right by Portland, and it's got a false summit.
Yeah.
And there's nothing worse than that. Thinking, oh, that's the top. That's the top. You get up there, you got another 1,000 feet.
That's where perseverance and a little grit come into play, and to continue asking that question: what do I need to learn today? Not tomorrow, not yesterday. What do I need to learn right now? And go learn that one thing, and then do it again.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. So I guess let's continue down the path of brackets a little bit.
Sure.
Or hypothetical business option, whatever it is we want to call this thing.
Widget 1.
So we've decided.
Widget 1.
Yeah, Widget 1.
Pretty good name.
So in the case of this one, we found some investing money and stuff like that to go forward. But a big part of, as you mentioned at the beginning, was your exit was sort of to get this licensed or get it out of your life and kind of move on. I guess collect a little royalty or whatever and then move past it.
Do you ever move past? No.
Well,
It's like children, man. It's like children.
Well, and I suppose the other version of that is this is a passion project and this is what you want to do for a living, so you make a job for yourself. But in a case like this, where you ultimately were hoping to unload this, I suppose you had to do some, I guess, business building or infrastructure building around this product once you had some financing and once you had that stuff. I mean, maybe it's a sales team or maybe it's manufacturing or whatever. But can you talk about sort of, okay, somebody's given me money, they believe in my product, now what?
Yeah, well, in the case of brackets, my investor brought in another team member, right? She wanted to, help build out the team with a variety of experience. I had the vision, I had the R&D side, I had, flowing in my veins was, the blood, sweat, and tears of talking to teachers and customers, and so I could really see the path. And so she brought in someone to help, build the team, establish bigger relationships with buyers, and work together. Right? It's very hard doing these things in your own head. You can convince yourself.
Well, and like you said, I mean, just to find somebody who has the pre-established relationships with a vendor, for example, or with a manufacturer or whatever it is you need. Those are relationships that are difficult to make on your own. Maybe you can find them, but they take time to develop and things like that. So it's almost a shortcut to bring in a professional that already has that background, already has the skills that offset whatever you do.
Yeah, and I've been involved in a number of things and listened to a lot of stories, and I don't know that there's a perfectly clear path to that. Relationships do matter for sure. They don't always matter. Experience matters and sometimes doesn't matter. So everything cuts a little bit two ways. And so, people with 30 years of toy experience, for example, come in and they've worked at large companies, but this is not a large company. And they had a marketing department. We don't have a marketing department.
Don't have it anymore, yeah.
How are we going to market on the cheap? Well, I don't know how to market on the cheap. I had a $200,000 budget. We don't have, we got $30,000.
If you're lucky.
Right? And so that level of experience is a mismatch. And so I think matching the right people and their level of experience and their passion. Sometimes passion and motivation, as you guys probably know, can go a lot farther than a Rolodex. And a Rolodex only comes out when someone pulls it out, right? Just because it's there doesn't mean
Well,
it just happens, right?
And just because you make that connection, no one's going to work harder on your project than you are. Like you can have someone on your team, but they're not going to stay up until 2 a.m. working on it like you would. Right. The passion and motivation is a driving force for a lot of people. So.
Well, and I think that whole concept of getting the match, right? Because I the way I posed it was a little bit naive, maybe hearing that description, because in my mind, the idea is, we'll just find somebody with the expertise and they'll help drive this. They'll get it to where it needs to be. But I hadn't even thought about the idea of that mismatch. And you're right. I mean, even in like my day job in our business, I run an advertising and marketing agency. And we run into situations like this all the time where we bid one client one way and they've got really deep pockets. And then we take that same philosophy to the startup or to the lean venture or to the whatever, or the mom and pop even. And they go, what are you talking about? I can't do that, And so part of it is, I guess, knowing your audience, trying to make sure you're working with people sort of on the same level. And then maybe, if there is a mismatch in levels, it's augmenting skill sets or things like that, maybe.
You've really outlined a common problem throughout business, and that is matching the right questions, the right people, and the right actions at the right time. And we all know that businesses, exist on a curve, right? They grow, but within that curve, there's cycles. And so you could take a startup of 2 to 10 or 11 to 20 and so on, and they go through different problems. And so in the beginning, it's brand awareness. How do we get our markets out? How do we get our product out? And things like that. And that's a very cagey, clever kind of environment, running thin. And then you reach a more mature stage, and now you're sort of arrived, and maybe some of this experience of running a business that's a certain number of millions of dollars is now important, and that means potentially a shuffle of the team. Changing
rehires,
roles,
different positions,
rehires,
all the HR problems that come into
different
play.
Spends, and cash is a problem throughout, but the need for cash is different at different times.
Yeah.
In the beginning, it's manufacturing and inventory, and everyone's kind of putting in sweat equity kind of thing, and then later on, it's other things. It could be a big marketing spend. Regardless of all that, though, what's important is to keep your culture intact. And you as the founder, we're talking to founders here that have the vision and the perseverance and the ability to stick with it, really kind of own that. And it's a vision, it's a culture, it's a mission, it's a set of values, and having those articulated and using those early on to make those decisions of who and what and when, I think is extremely valuable and easy to lose sight of.
Okay, so to that end, what are your thoughts about, I guess, we sort of have talked about maybe, I don't want to say it's gone completely away, but the idea of a business plan or like a formal business plan is maybe sort of old tech, right? I mean, people still do them, and maybe you can establish it further down the line, but like to try and do it from the very beginning is difficult. What do you think about documenting process and figuring out those sorts of things, the mechanical bits of a business? Like, I mean, it sounds like you're talking a little bit about that, but I guess what I'm not understanding is if it's, a physical document where you're writing this stuff down so that you can share it with other people or whatever, or if it's, just something that you're developing as you go through the steps. Like you're learning it as you go through the motions, but it's not really about, formally developing a process. And maybe it depends by business even. That could be a big question.
Yeah, we're sort of juggling a yin and a yang kind of thing. Writing things down on paper is extremely valuable, in my opinion. I like paper. I'm a little older now, so paper's still there. But a place where people can review and reflect on it is super valuable. It means something, the effort that went into putting it there. But the important thing to realize is it can change. And I can't remember the word you just used, but it should be a learning document. It should be in progress. Mm-hmm. And I even like keeping the prior versions.
Lots of times the prior versions, as you go back and look at them, will apply later on down the road. Something that you thought of then that didn't really make sense, but now it does.
Right, so flipping back through them like a little slide deck.
Like maybe you start with an MVP, and then an idea that you thought of didn't fit into that can come in later.
They're your future features. They're your future markets. They're extensions, maybe new inventions that take you in an additional business.
I know, a whole nother road.
So I try to look at them like single-page documents, if you can do them as single-page documents early on, because that's very flexible. Iterate on them quite a bit. Descriptions about your market could be many pages, and that's okay. And that turns into kind of a reference document and all the ideas that came about. And that may not change a whole lot, but quarter to quarter, the rhythm should be updating a 1 or 2 page marketing plan, updating a 1 or 2 page strategic plan, and frequently refreshing those in a business review rhythm is really valuable. And everything's about appropriate, scale. If it's a daily rhythm, right, you're really going to do it as a stand-up. If it's a weekly rhythm, it's potentially an hour, and monthly and quarterly just get a little heavier. And that's okay, as long as everything's matched appropriately to the time and people involved.
Are you a goal person? Do you set like year and 5-year goals and kind of try and get to that point? Or are you just kind of, you have a broad overview of what you need to do and just kind of work every day at it?
No, I do like setting goals, and I like revising them. And I don't like revising them just because, you're not meeting them, but you learn new things. And setting a goal that is mismatched with reality is hard on people. And if you leave it there and you don't adjust it with new information, then everyone is chasing something that will be difficult to achieve, and it's unsettling. That doesn't mean you don't set stretch goals, but you set too far of a stretch, then you've basically defined your future as failure. So then how do you define successes? And it's important to succeed, even in very small increments.
No, I agree with that 100%. As I've been working on this project, I have the overall view, and I've set a year goal and I haven't hit it. I've set a 2-year goal, haven't hit it. But those small, like, okay, I finished this page and this functionality is working. It feels great. And I think, I don't know. I like having the broad overview of where I want to be, and then the small daily goals are where it kind of, I get my gratification. Right. And it's getting to completion is the hardest thing for me, because it's like, what route do I go? What do I learn now? Mm-hmm. What do I learn there? Because there's so many different paths and so many things that, do you hire a specialist? Do you do it yourself? And it's interesting to me, just the process. So
it gets overwhelming.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't have a product yet, how do you set a 5-year goal? Well, it's 5 years.
Right.
That's a lifetime and you could be at plan, your 4th or 5th iteration of what this thing is and what the market is.
Yeah.
But we would frequently set, once we kind of knew the business and had a bit of a machine running, we would set 3-year goals and then work backwards and set 1 years and quarterlies. And then what are the actions and behaviors to meet those? And then how do we establish a regular rhythm of talking and reviewing
updating
those
and
actions?
Going back.
Are they working? What needs to start? What needs to stop? And just revisiting that frequently.
That's important, I think. Yeah.
Great. Well, cool. Well, I think we've more or less covered the lifespan. I mean, obviously, brackets is still ongoing, so I mean, we haven't reached an end point of that. I mean, I guess you did build in some kind of exit strategy, so you're not involved in the day-to-day, as you mentioned.
Correct.
But what's next for you? What are you working on these days? As much as you can get into it, anyway.
Yeah, well, probably too many things.
This sounds about right.
Yeah, I've been approached to help consult and coach a few businesses, and I've had so much fun doing that I'm seeking additional clients, both existing as well as ones that are trying to start up and really get off the ground. The existing businesses are trying to innovate. They're trying to find new growth opportunities or to take what they do and expand it a little bit. So we talk about everything from pricing and costs, negotiating terms, cash and employees, right?
Yeah.
How to nudge that forward. And then with the new ones, it's a lot of what we've already discussed. How do we validate this idea before we
Moving
go get
forward.
money? And everyone seems to want to go get money really fast. And I pour a little cold water on that. And if it's so early that you go out and get money and you'll burn through the money.
Oh, yeah.
You'll spend the money, and if you don't have a clear product market fit, product customer fit, the problem really known well, you're going to go through that money and you're going to be at the same place you were, with a chunk of your business gone, with a chunk of somebody's money gone, maybe yours, maybe somebody else's, and that doesn't feel good.
No.
Even if it's somebody else's, that doesn't feel good, and they aren't having a good time either. And
No,
so
of course.
the closer you can, get up to that edge, know that edge really well, and begin to mitigate the risk, as you said, Ryan, just the better that whole path goes. But it's tough too, because there are expenses. You need a little bit of legal. You make prototypes, or you hire a programmer. Build me a little bit. Build me an MVP, or build me the beginning of that. And there is money going out. And so
maybe to that end then. So this is maybe a big step backwards. Like maybe should have come up earlier in the conversation, but now that you've said that, I was thinking about it. For a lot of startups, or even people like me, I have a day job, and I run my other business, and it does pretty well, and I can provide for my family and all this stuff. But there's limited funds to run out and start building out things, or start testing stuff in market, or whatever. Are there tips or tricks or anything you would say about sort of really early, really lean, really very beginning startups, like how people get moving? I guess there's friends and family loans and things like that, but if you're just random guy and you've got random idea and you want to go do something with it, how would you begin the process?
Shark Tank.
What's the what?
Shark Tank.
well, if you're really early on, I would go the friends and families route and just dip into that very carefully. Know why you're asking for what you're asking and what it's for, and can you do anything else before you need to spend that money? Can you go ask people on the street corner? Can you go into a coffee shop, and these stories are famous, and show them, a flip board of your app idea?
Well, speaking of coffee shops, the guy that created the wrap around the Starbucks, the hot cup thing.
Yep.
I was watching a documentary on it, and he was in I think it was Portland. Went into a coffee shop, and they were putting double napkins around it, and he got the idea to create that sleeve, and then he manufactured a bunch on his own, took it to the coffee shop, and said, "Would you like this?" And then he built the product from there.
There you go.
And it set his family. He's set for life.
Perfect example. Of
Yeah.
that.
Every time I go into REI with this new outdoor product, which I can't get super into.
Yeah.
I talk to every new salesperson I can meet, and they help you out. And whether it's a young woman or a young man or an older man, and lots of different generations there, they have different stories.
Well, especially
It's
in
amazing.
REI, for example, most people that work there are living the lifestyle too. So they're the perfect people to
They're
talk
the
to
customer,
about it. Yeah.
and they're a sales associate,
Yep.
and they even
So they
have
cover
maybe
both worlds.
a sense of the volume, right?
Yeah.
The throughput.
Well, and those would be your
On the
best
product.
advocates too, I suppose, because not only are they the customer, but they would also, they sell the things they're confident in, or have used in the field or whatever.
Right.
So, if they can believe in your product, then it makes perfect sense that they would support it, in sales and passing it on to other
So
people.
imagine a conversation with a potential investor, and you say, "I've had 100 of these conversations, and here they are in tabular format.
Do you just do Cliff Notes and kind of keep them?
Whatever works for you."
Yeah.
I grab whatever tool works. Excel
So like if-
spreadsheets, and then they get too big.
Yeah.
They get cumbersome, and I
Right.
just huck pictures in there. Some people use Evernote. I like Excel because at some point I can bust out a column and I can give a rank.
So if you were going to show it
know.
to someone, like your conversations and the history and the work that you've put into it, do you just put a PowerPoint together? And it's almost like a pitch deck, right? For the most part?
Yeah, I would even pull off the pitch deck. There's
Yeah.
so much baggage that goes along with that. You need a 15-page pitch deck, and it's
Yeah.
got to show this, it's got to show that. And it's like, if
Do you like
don't
the
need
idea?
that yet,
Yeah.
show them the evidence.
Yeah.
We get all formal about it sometimes, and I just think the more natural story, especially early on, is better.
Just talk about it.
Just,
Yeah.
it's just how we work as people.
Yeah.
I would take that approach and have an open conversation. A pitch deck is a closed conversation. You have to finish your pitch deck.
Yeah.
What's open about it, right?
Right.
A PowerPoint page can't and shouldn't show a lot,
Yeah.
right? But if you ever get to that point and you say, 100 conversations with, this demographic, that's relevant there.
Yeah.
But if you're having a more open conversation about, I've talked to 100 people, and this is what they all say, want to see.
Yeah.
right? If that's appropriate for the conversation at that time.
That makes sense.
So I really like doing that, and then other existing businesses, and then this idea of my own is what I'm focusing on. So I'm trying to practice all that, and I have the same trappings of wanting to go there,
Yeah.
right? Wanting to do the CAD diagrams.
Sure.
But that costs money.
He's already done it.
I'm 3 days into a new idea, and I've got the engineering drawings.
Well, I mean, it's not always bad. That's why it's hard for me to say, one way or another. It should go this way.
Well, that's
Sometimes
the thing.
That's right.
Yeah, I think we're notorious, like sort of in society, and even in my little bit of entrepreneurial life or trying to get startups going and things like that. And just trying to figure it out. I think we're all looking for the path of least resistance, right? What we want is a straight line.
right.
We don't want to hear that it wiggles. We want this straight line that I'm going to come up with my product, somebody's going to buy it, then they're going to give me money, and then I got a beach place. And we're not really thinking about all the zigs and zags and all that other stuff, and really that sort of de-romanticizes the idea a little bit.
It does.
Because when you're fed all these, possibilities, and at any time you could just crash and burn or get sued or get whatever. No matter how much progress you make, you could just be killed at some point. It's, I think it can be a little bit discouraging, at least to people like me who are like real ideologues. I have these ideas and I want to run with them, and I get fired up about it, and I'm ready to go. And
3 weeks later, it's on to the next one.
3 weeks later, it's on to the next one, and last idea never went anywhere. And so it is it is difficult, and I don't know. I mean, for me, it's refreshing to hear from people like you who've done a lot of this stuff. For me, I need to hear about the zigzags so that when I encounter them, I don't freak out. I knew this was coming, so I think it's helpful. But
Well, surround yourself with people or processes that you're disciplined to do, and hold yourself to it. Be accountable to that is my best advice. I have the same problem. But it is that winding path that's reality. And more you're hearing dialogues from the big people that, have all the money. It's like, I want to hear that story.
Yeah.
Because if I don't hear that story,
yeah.
there's way too much risk in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and it's pretty easy to assess yourself a failure if all you read is, the last article on Zuckerberg, not the whole, 10 years it took to get it anywhere kind of part. So
no matter what we do, there's the
to,
glamorous story, and everyone repeats it. Sports,
Sure.
I mean, goes on, and it's just, it's not reality for most of us.
Yeah. Well, and I think, but I think that's good. I think, it's beneficial to sort of knock down that ideal that, everybody just strikes it rich in tech or whatever it is. I mean, for every, Zuckerberg or Jobs, there's 25 gazillion others who tried and failed.
Well, and even Job's story. Go back to
Yeah.
day one.
Yeah.
He was kicked out.
Yeah.
Right? I've been a Macintosh fan for a long time, and
Well,
that was not
and-
an
and
easy
they
go
brought
just
him-
as a consumer.
They brought him back like 10 years later to save the company, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
And
like
he
they
had-
kicked
he'd
him out and
literally
brought
been
him back.
booted out.
Yeah.
And lots of product failures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Evidence, collect your evidence. We've launched products, and I've heard that's geeky, and now it's one of our best sellers.
Yeah.
Sure.
And there's no way you could have figured that out. And so, collecting the evidence and then going for it and persevering, there is something to that,
Cool.
with a mind on risk management.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
I
Well-
love that. Well, yeah. So let's wrap this thing up.
Before we do, though,
Okay.
I
Oh, wait,
want
there's more.
I want best book of all time. Like if I was going to listen to an audiobook, what should I download?
Oh my gosh, that's an
I know.
impossible
I know.
question.
Like if you were to pick one out of your top 5.
Out of my top 5.
I think on the questionnaire you answered one. Let me see.
Yeah, tell me what I answered.
Right.
Now that I'm on stage here,
I know. I'm the same way.
What did I say? And I'll give a little
I'm
expansion
trying
on that.
Mastering Marketing Cycles by Howard Marks.
Yeah, so this is so far away, in a way, from entrepreneurism. But Howard Marks just recently wrote a book called Mastering the Market Cycle. And I'm kind of an investing geek, too.
Mm-hmm.
But really what I'm really into is behavior. behavioral economics, behavioral psychology, managing ourselves.
Well,
Because-
your next book in there is Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett.
There you
So,
go.
I mean, it's like that right there.
So design is a behavioral process, right? What we've talked a lot about here is behavior, and I like Howard Marks because I read it recently, and we're in an interesting time in the economy and the stock market right now in terms of cycles. What's great about the book is he doesn't get into specifics. Here we are exactly on the cycle, but that we have cycles, and that you can collect evidence, a basket of items, 20, 30, 40, and add them up and say, well, we're getting closer to the top, or we're in the middle, or we just left the bottom. He doesn't say, I'm here. Back to your point about a linear path.
Yeah.
It's a zigzagging path. It's a cloud of uncertainty. And the more you can reduce that cloud, the more you can get close to a point. But you have to recognize you're never going to get the point. No one can get the point. No one knows the future.
Yeah.
And so it was relaxing. It took a load off my shoulders in terms of like, where's the top? Where's the top? When do I buy? When do I sell? And I know that's a poor way of looking at it.
Yeah.
But we have these emotions. We have this click whir response. And we have to manage that. So really any book on that topic. Influence by Robert Cialdini is another great one. The Designing Your Life was all about managing yourself and your perceptions as you go through, seeking your path.
Nice.
Cool.
Well, thank you.
Are you satisfied, Mike? or do
I'm
you need
satisfied.
more?
I just wanted to get the input there.
No, it's great. No, actually, I mean, I forget that not everyone's read the questionnaire. I mean, there's a lot of good information on there, and yeah, good to squeeze some of those books out of him because I think everybody's looking for the answer. Although I think a lot of us spend too much time looking for the answer and not enough time going.
So before we get out, do you want to throw out the website one more time for your product?
Yeah, for brackets, it's brackitz.com.
Okay.
And we have an educational division as well, which you can get from the navigation there. And then if anyone's interested in talking to me, look me up on LinkedIn. My last name's spelled Cochella, Cochella.
Perfect.
Cool. All right. Well,
Thanks
with
again
that,
for coming
Thanks so
in.
much for your time, Chris. And let's do this again sometime.
Yeah, thank you guys.
So
It was a
now,
pleasure.
now knowing that you're an investor, we got more to talk about. So we got to come back. We got to come back around, but we won't keep you another hour. So cool.
Right on.
Thanks to everybody who tuned in on the YouTube stream and everybody who downloads this every week. Rate, like, subscribe, tell your mom, tell your friends, and we'll see y'all next time.